root in us like an extra limb, a reminder of origin that haunts us in the flurry of adulthood. Growing Up Filipino 3 articulates such amorphous spaces of childhood and origin as it simultaneously unfolds the fabrics of class, history, and culture. This is the third volume in the series pioneered and edited by esteemed fictionist Cecilia Brainard, whose own storytelling reveals the frictions of her living memory and the pains of looking for home. Similarly, this anthology spotlights Filipino and Filipino American voices as they recapture their childhood and attempt to build an idea of home from fragments of memory. Like the other books in the series, this volume also presents universal themes of youth, but it gives way to the Filipino experience and the precarity of our social, cultural, and political condition as we bear the wounds that are born from our colonial past and persist under the injustices committed by our leaders. But with it also comes the magic of memory. Remembering the nuances of youth is especially potent as we struggle in the wake of the pandemic, where it has been difficult to be human amidst statistics. Memory and tale become a balm to this dehumanization. These pages evoke the tenderness of a hug that has been deprived of us for years, the warmth of homecoming, and the power of lore in reuniting a community. O, diba? So, with that, welcome to the launching of Growing Up Filipino 3, and I hope you enjoy the evening.
Thank you, Ned, and I will, who should be here, but it's so I think I will, Ned already mentioned what this book is about. It's a collection of 25 short stories by Filipino American authors, and there's also an author from Singapore. And it's basically about being young and being Filipino. And I just love the collection, and anyway, I hope that you will like it too. The stories, I think, are quite strong. You're going to hear a sampler, so I will just let you hear it and make your own decision. I do want to acknowledge some people who have really made this book launch happen. First of all, thanks to UST Press for publishing the book, the Philippine edition. There is also a US edition of the book. Yvette Fernandez, Patricia Go, and Ned Farfan were really instrumental in making this particular launch happen. I live in the States, and it was really very difficult for me to try and organize something like this, and so they were the ones who really made it happen. Thank you very, very much. In particular, Patty Go had many trips back and forth, and Ned too, to Fully Booked. And Ivy Santos is over there, quietly recording this, live streaming it, and thank you, Ivy. She also set up the Facebook events page. I also want to mention Ian Kasokop, who is in the book, but who designed the cover. And the artist, our book artist, is a young, very talented artist, Hersley Van Casero. And I just think their art is really very, very nice, and I wanted to mention them. The other thing I wanted to mention are the contributors who are not here, because they are very much a part of the book. And as soon as I find that page, here we go. So Gina Apostol is a contributor. Marilyn Altisola, I mentioned Ian Kasokop, Linda T. Casper, Patrick Joseph Kawili, Noel De Jesus, Mix Bravo Dutt, James Pajarito, Zach Linmar, Veronica Montes, Kanika Pena. Kanika was supposed to be here, but last minute she couldn't. Oscar Peñaranda, Eileen Caballos, Fabios. Sa Amerika naging Caballos. Fabios. Eileen Fabios, Brian Roy, Renee Macalino Rutledge, and Marianne Villanueva. Even though they're not here, I very much acknowledge their contribution to the book. So I think we're going to have a brisk program. So we have a reading, the authors are here, and I'm just gonna start it off, because I'm here. So, my contribution to this book is a short story entitled Dead Boy, The Dead Boy. So, we are in Ubek. It was my best friend, Mildred, who called at 7 in the morning. "Have you heard?" she asked. "What?" I had been rushing through my breakfast. "About Bill Lowry." "What about him?" "He's dead." "Dead," I guessed. "Shot 6 times with a rifle. Magellan Hills." "Dead," I repeated. Ubek was so small, you kept track of births, marriages, and deaths. Either event was big news. "What happened?" they asked. "I'll tell you later," she arrived. I bolted down the rest of my rice and hurriedly told my mother what happened. Making the sign of the cross, she raced to the telephone while I took off for school. The principal called a school assembly since everyone talked of nothing but the murder, and Sister Candida figured she might as well confront the matter and put it to rest. Besides, Linda was a student, and when Mr. Lowry was alive, he gave hefty donations to the nuns. Voice shaking, the principal announced over the microphone that an unfortunate incident had occurred last night. The brother of our alumna, William Lowry, was killed by an unknown assailant. She urged us to pray for the repose of his soul, then she led prayers for the dead. Some high school girls started sobbing, which I found embarrassing, although I felt like crying myself. Bill was tall, angular, with brashy hair the color of some exotic fruit. He could be standoffish at times and flirtatious at other times. He bewitched us all. When he and Bebop became a twosome, Miriam had the most beautiful, sleekest black hair that fell below her waist, cut it to show her sorrow. She even wore dark colors for weeks. I had laughed at Miriam then, but later I envied her for her gumption. I could never have done anything that dramatic. It was because I grew up fatherless, but I preferred being invisible. I never told anyone that I had a crush on Bill, no one. And when Bill himself had been around, I hardly acknowledged his presence. He was too old for me, too out of reach, a demigod. Even when Mildred told her her biggest secret, she had seen Jojo Katikbak's penis when he changed his trunks at a picnic. I never revealed a thing. Sister Candida's assembly made no dent on our high emotions. Girls walked around sniveling and crying. They blamed Bebop Gilderama for seducing Bill, for driving him up the hills, for causing his early death. Miriam swore she'd shave off her head. She said Bebop should have died, not Bill. Now, and if then, you have to get the book and read it. So, our next reader is Nikki Alfar. Nikki is a wife, mother, fictionist, dancer, kickboxer, knitter, and origami folder. While she has yet to receive acclaim for folding, knitting, boxing, dancing, mothering, or wifing, she has managed to catch repeated recognition out of the Palanca, Nick Joaquin, and International Mariner literary authorities, as well as back-to-back national book awards for her story collections, Wanderlust, and now Then and Elsewhere. And a reading for Nikki is Mr. Dean Alfar.
Good evening. From Lola Gay and the Crispa Redmanizers. During the basketball season when I was young, Lola Gay would ritually invoke divine intervention on behalf of the Crispa Redmanizers. Her eyes would be glued to the televised hardcourt. Her ears, presumably, were heeding the sonorous tones of the announcer, while simultaneously engaged in spirited
dialogue with God. Their conversations were conducted in a polyglot mixture of English, Ipanag, a smattering of her faulty Tagalog, and Spanish cursing. Diablo! 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 Lola would cry out, and for years, I remained convinced that this Spanish word for devil literally meant, "Look, Lord, the ball has been stolen," since that was generally what was occurring on screen those times. She was not actually my grandmother. Rather, she was the distant cousin of my mother's late mother and had come to help my parents out when Mom had unexpectedly given birth to twins, resulting in a household raised or cursed with no less than 4 rambunctious boys under the age of 5. By the time I was convinced, once again surprising my over-amorous parents but utterly delighting Lola, "We will have a full team," she cried. She had firmly established herself as the family authority on all matters spiritual, logistical, and nutritional. When the 5 of us kids had exams at school, we were forbidden to eat eggs in any form, as the Holy Spirit had pointed out to her that the oval shape of the eggs, when taken into our bodies, would naturally result in a test score of 0. She tyrannically decreed that our beds were never to be arranged pointing towards our bedroom doors, since this would provide a clear path that was certain to be followed by the insatiable angel of death, who apparently liked nothing better than to populate paradise with the pure souls of more or less innocent children. And she sternly compelled me to eat every last spoonful of rice on my plate, as neglecting a single grain would be a sinful excess, which might induce God to punish me by forcing me to endure my next life as a chicken, pathetically scratching at the ground for any stray bit of rice thoughtlessly discarded by wastrel girls. It was Lola who taught me how to pray, as well as how to cook her way. To make perfect palitaw, you must, the way that your mommy likes it, you must sink the pieces in boiling water for no longer than 1 Our Father, 1 Hail Mary, and 1 Glory Be. Then they will float to the surface, and you can take them out to roll in sugar and coconut. Then you are finished, and your soul is saved from purgatory at the same time. I remember staring at the stove, trying to determine how to convert this culinary catechism to the seconds or minutes commonly used by the other 98% of the global population. Lola Ging could have been the world champion at rapid rosary recitation if they ever held the Olympics at the Vatican. It was almost dizzying listening to her intone the mysteries at velocities approaching Mach 1. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with you, blessed are you amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of your womb, Jesus. I was old enough by then to wonder if the Blessed Virgin, who was not, as it turned out, a god herself, and therefore not omniscient, could possibly understand what Lola was saying. There were times when I had trouble myself. It had only been during my confirmation ceremony a few years earlier that I had learned that the act of contrition did not, in fact, go, "Oh my God, I am heartily sorry for having offended thee." Or, "Oh my God, I am hardly sorry for having offended thee." Which had seemed like rather a disrespectful way to petition our Creator for forgiveness. Lola maintained that her intermediary intercession was invariably efficacious, despite the fact that the Redmanizers seemed to lose nearly as often as they won. They win because of the power of prayer, Lola said. But sometimes they lose because they are stupid. Thank you.
Our next reader is George Deoso, who has a PA in Literature and an MA in Creative Writing from UST. He is the author of The Horseman's Revolt and Other Horrors, a collection of dark short fiction. His fiction, poetry, and essays have appeared in publications such as Iwayway, Philippine Panorama, Philippine Graphic, Philippine Daily Inquirer, the Sunday Times Magazine, amongst many others. And here is George.
Hello, I'll be reading from my story called The Child, and I'll begin now. Us. The night was even colder now. as she made her way to where she had parked her car. She cursed herself for having failed to find the nearby parking space, for having to comment. She could hear the muffled steps of her class on the asphalt, and the night wind rustling the dark trees that stood at the roadside lots, unoccupied by a house. Suddenly, Sylvia felt the sensation that she was being followed. Her back felt weighed by someone's gaze. She stopped in her tracks and looked back at the path she had just crossed. The road was empty and parked cars looked back at her with their dead headlights and black windshields. The few houses around were equally silent. Lights on the windows seemed to have been toned down. Murmurings from the bright church she left were unintelligible at this distance. She made for her car with a quickened pace. Heart racing, Sylvia felt an odd mix of fear and sadness in her. How she had been reduced to this woman, too confused to process another's suffering. When she reached the car, she eased herself in and leaned her head on the wheel. She could feel her heart beating, and for a moment, she felt the urge to just pass out and let the morning find her that way. A crazy woman. A sad and crazy woman. She wanted to weep, but she felt dry as an ancient well. She lifted her head and gazed at the silent road beyond the hood. Thoughts of her husband came to her, like a pleasant memory. By now, Max would have washed himself already, perhaps had already cooked something for the two of them. He wouldn't ask about her day, but that was fine. They knew each other well enough to know what questions mattered, and what answers they were better off not knowing. She had turned on the overhead light, and Sylvia now could see her own clammy hands on the wheel. When she started the engine, she thought she heard the laugh of a child beside her. She stared at the shotgun seat, which of course was empty. When Jack was in middle grade, she had often glanced at him sitting on the seat before the red lights, when she drove him to and from the school. He had always been that smart and quiet kid who disliked conversations. Sylvia sighed. She lifted her hand to fix the rear view mirror, and a cry escaped from her. She had just moved the mirror with a slight tilt when Sylvia caught something in the reflection. The eyes of a bald girl sitting in the middle of the back seat. Their gazes met through the mirror. In the split second that she moved to turn her head, the thought that the seat might be empty and that she was alone crossed her mind. But the girl was still there. She still had that smile and crisp white dress with square pattern all across. "Hi there," the girl said, beaming. Her little hands were clasped before her chest, the bald head still gleamed. For a while she was frozen in her seat. Sylvia wondered if she forgot to lock the car, but was at once certain that she didn't leave it open. How come you're here?" she asked the girl, shaking. "It's boring in there." The girl's hand pointed at something behind, and it took Sylvia some time to realize that this was the church the kid was referring to. Sylvia swallowed. "And you came here because you're bored?" "I don't know. There's so much crying and saying." Sylvia turned back to the front of the car, leaning her head on the rest. She closed her eyes, gripped the wheel, felt the engine vibrating through it. She thought, "This isn't true. This isn't true." When she looked in the back seat, the girl was still there, a confused look in the child's eyes. Sylvia then asked, her voice shaking, "What's your name?" "Name?" The girl thought for a while. "I don't know. I just woke up in there today. I don't know what to do." She pointed again at the church. That was when something kicked in Sylvia. Like a puzzle she didn't know, that was suddenly being solved in front of her. "Let's go back," she said without looking at the girl. "Why?" the voice from the back seat said. "The mass isn't finished yet." That concludes my reading. Thank you.
Thank you, George. So our next reader is Patricia Manuel Go, who was born and raised in the Philippines by her British mother and Filipino father. She has an MA in psychology from the Ateneo de Manila University, which she credits with helping her remain reasonably sane, since she can usually find a way to explain why people, including herself, behave the way they do. She started just not too long ago, maybe 1.5 years ago, and the story in the book is her first published novel, and she is currently developing the story Pig into a novel. And here is Patricia Go.
Apologies in advance for all the bad words in this story. I am worried about my pig. He lives in our lanai and his name is Pompeo. His nickname is Pomp. He's not officially my pig. My brother Nico ordered him from teacuppiggies.com without telling anyone. And the next day, there was a tiny black and white pot-bellied piglet in our living room. He was pretty scared and kept running around on his hoofs that looked like high heels. But then he calmed down, and it was like he'd always been here. Nico has never fed him, taken him to the vet, or given a shit about him since he got here. So I took over, and now he's mine. Pompey is still black and white, but the dude who sold him to my brother was definitely lying when he said he was a miniature. We watched him go from 18 pounds to 35, 67, 110. He's at least 165 pounds by now, and he's not going to stop growing anytime soon, which is kind of a problem. See, my dad, who pays for everything in this house and is not an animal lover, has no idea Pompey exists. Dad lives in our other house, in the village across from this one on Ortigas Avenue. He comes to visit us every day for about 5 minutes, 10 max. It hasn't been easy keeping Pompey a secret, that's for sure. It helps that my dad is the least spontaneous person I know. We always know when he's coming, which is probably one reason my mom left him. That's why my brother and I live in this house by ourselves. Well, there are 2 helpers, a driver, and 2 houseboys, so we're not really by ourselves. But there's no adult supervision. Yaya Remy is supposed to be in charge, but she usually lets us do what we want, and now she can't even say, "I will tell you to your mom," like she used to. So, when Dad says he's coming, we hide Pompey next to the dirty kitchen and turn the music up to cover any grunts. The other day, we had a scare because I left my phone upstairs and didn't hear Dad calling. I walked into the living room and almost choked on the protein shake I was drinking when I saw him sitting in his emperor chair. He yelled at me in his usually fatherly manner, glaring at the piles of dirty clothes that hadn't made it to the laundry room, dumbbells and other random stuff, sitting on the opium bed in the middle of the living room. Putangina, Jaime, this house is one big garbage can. How can you and your brother stand it here? You're 20 years old now. When are you going to start acting like it? I kept my cool. I thanked St. Anthony, patron saint of pigs, that Pompey was asleep near the pool, out of Dad's sight, and not snoring, which he does sometimes. I know, Dad, I'm sorry. When are you moving in with us? I know you'll fix everything up in no time. Whenever I need my dad to leave ASAP, all I have to do is bring up him moving in here. Pompey stirred, got up, and headed slowly toward us. My heart was clanging like a gong in my chest, but my face showed nothing. Pompey stopped to smell the yellow flowers Yaya planted near the pool. A vein throbbed on the side of my dad's shiny head. Pompey began his trek again. He was 3 feet away. I remembered St. Anthony just in time, shut my eyes, and sent out an SOS. I opened my eyes. Pompey was in the lanai. Fuck! I prepared myself for the wrath of Jose Policarpio Marcelino III. But then, my dad suddenly did that thing where he looks at the ground while talking to me. Jaime, I forgot. I have a meeting with your Tito Boy in the fan lobby. What time is it? 5? Putangina, I'm late na. I'll see you tomorrow. Dad got up and zoomed out just as Pompey plopped on the floor with an extra loud grunt.
So our next reader is Sarge Lacuesta, who has won 3 National Book Awards, the Madrigal Gonzalez Best First Book Award, the NVM Gonzalez Award, and numerous Palanca Awards and Philippine Graphics Awards. He has written several books of fiction and non-fiction, as well as a number of films. He is editor-at-large at Esquire Philippines, senior editor at Panorama, the Journal of Intelligent Travel, and he is currently president of PEN Philippines Center. Here is Sarge Lacuesta.
It's almost sort of like our own childhood pain, no? But this is about my childhood joy. From Nilda. My father wanted me to become a lawyer like him. He spoke to me about how much trouble he had gone through for me. I knew the way to make a kid serious was to warn him of the consequences. He told me if I didn't study, I'd end up like Moroy, whose meager future depended solely on his master, and whose job, ultimately, was to be expendable. Moroy handed his gun to me once. There was so much to touch, so much to feel. There were ridges, incisions, screwheads, crisscross patterns, pinholes, and nipples. It smelled of oil and metal. My hand could not refuse its shape. I held it the only way it allowed, tightly embraced around the grip, pointer fingers slipping into the trigger's hollow. I went further and aimed it at the sky and pulled the trigger. He had second-guessed me and it was empty, but the force felt so real. Something clicked and the gun vibrated with a tight metallic sound that startled even Nilda, who just stared at us. One day, Moroy whispered, "You shoot a loaded gun with real bullets." Nilda's duty was to pay attention to me, to take notice of me, every inch, every part, every blemish and scar, from the sun-baked hair she shampooed every day to the toenails she clipped every 2 weeks. She was fresh from the province, pale and very young, hired by my mother to replace the old woman who had been wet nurse, maid, and servant to me for several years. I spent most of the summer climbing the mango trees at the edge of our front yard. They were tall and thick enough to spread over our concrete fence and gave our house a dark, imposing presence. But from my low branch, the light was gentle, and I found I could feel the breezes that glanced off our small swimming pool in the middle of the terrace. As the day advanced, I saw the tree's shadow grow longer on the grass and the dogs bark in relief before everything quieted down toward the evening. At dinner time, my father had Nilda fetch me from the tree, and I opened my arms to let the afternoon's bounty tumble into her outstretched skirt. In the twilight, her legs looked very white against the mango tree's dark bark and my own skinny brown legs. Nilda had come from a province overgrown with mango trees. She taught me how to climb our tree and pick its fruit. She taught me how to peel the mangoes and how to eat them. She taught me how to make 3 sauces that made 3 different flavors. It was Nilda who tasted of the green mango we ate, both of us sitting by the pool in the sun and the heat. It was her tongue in my mouth during that long kiss. On that first hot day by the pool, she opened herself to me and her thighs held on to my small body. The sun beat on my head like a hammer, and as I grew hard, I felt a head rush, as though the impossible length and girth of my manhood had dissipated me. I couldn't move. Only my knees moved. They trembled uncontrollably. Moroy had demonstrated this movement to me by pumping a middle finger in a tightly rolled fist. "One day you'll do that," he had told me. And when I struck my own finger in my fist, he laughed because I didn't get it. But once from my tree, I saw 2 dogs staring around each other in what I had thought was a heat-crazed stupor as they struck and mounted, joints frozen as the male bumped into the female. Nilda moved with me and around me. Moroy promised I would feel like a man after my first time, but I felt I'd been swallowed whole, a small boy with small, salty, sweating skin sliding into her opening. I had thought it would make me stronger, but I could predict nothing. The rush came from nowhere and from everywhere. She was silent as she held me and only whispered yes. As she guided me into her dark and wet, dark and wet, smelling of the sun and the pool chlorine like nothing else I'd ever seen or felt. Over lulls in my father's schedule, Moroy would drive me around aimlessly. We ventured through tight roads, into tough neighborhoods, their houses dark and cramped, their street corners and sidewalks packed with people. Moroy was a policeman once, and this had been his beat. He knew people wherever he went, the security guards at warehouse gates, the bums that hung out in front of gambling dens and sari-sari stores, the tough guys guarding the beer garden doors. Sometimes he got out of the car so he could buy cigarettes or gin, and when he walked, he squared his shoulders
and walked a little slower than usual. It was like a killer's walk. He enjoyed the moment. I tried to match his stride.
Thank you, Sarge. Our next reader is Danton Remoto. He is the author of 2 novels, River Run and Heart of Summer. He has also published a book of stories, 3 books of poems, and 6 books of essays in English. The Writers' Union of the Philippines has awarded him with a Pambansang Alagad ni Balagtas National Achievement Award. He has been a fellow at the Cambridge University Summer Seminar and the Breadloaf Writers Conference. He has also translated novels into English, into Filipino, and now you're doing a radio show also? Yes, I cannot keep up with Danton's activities. He's very active. Here is Danton Remoto.
Si Sarge, kasi bilang with text, I will continue na lang, no? Now, this is a very old story that I rewrote for. I'm happy to be here, no? I just arrived last week. I got lost I couldn't find Fully Booked anymore, no? I haven't been here in 8 years, in Fully Booked. This is a story called The Kite. The days went by. The wind began to die amongst the acacia leaves, shrouding our house. And the heat became so fierce it gave me headaches. At noon, when I squinted, I could see the heat waves rising like small liquid snakes in the air. I kept to myself, catching up with the lecture notes that my friend Luis had lent to me. When graduation day came, I was quite disappointed because I only got the second honors. Maria Teresa, a tall, lovely girl with a black mole, like a 5-cent coin on her right cheek, got the first honors. Anyway, I'll study harder in grade 4, I thought. And besides, it was already summer. I knew I could roam everywhere with my friends, with no thought of the assignments I had to do for next day's classes. During the days, my friends and I played with marbles the color of a peacock's tail. Sometimes, my friends spun their wooden tops, and I could only stare at them with savage envy as they threw their wooden tops on the ground. The tops would spin and spin with such grace and speed for all the world to see, a whirl of wood and light and air. And then, my classmates would lasso their tops and throw them right in the middle of their palms, and the tops would still be alive and spinning in a blur. When I did that with my tops, my wooden top would wobble on its tiny pointed toe and just drop dead. When night fell, we had mock war battles with the boys from the other side of the river. We used slingshots for weapons, and for bullets, we used clay pellets or dried papaya seeds. My friend Luis and I always belonged to the same group. I thought of ourselves as Batman and Robin, together, now and forever, for all time. Sometimes we would hide behind the trunk of the giant acacia tree, our bodies pressed close together. Oh, I could smell the fragrance of soap on his skin, or feel his arm warm against mine. And then the cicadas would begin their one-note singing, a rich, heavy sound that would sift through the rooms and flow to the nearby homes, warm with lights and the smell of dinner. I always felt safe and invincible when I was with Luis. I wish I could be with him until we grow old. Sometimes my friends and I played hopscotch or hide and seek, hiding behind the trees in the pigsty or near the bamboo cages inside which the chickens disturbed would cackle. And when the chaser would be near any of us, we would run away, our shadows breaking the moonlight. After this game of hide and seek, the winner's shrill voices rose in the air, and in the sky, the stars of summer shuddered. Thank you.
Thank you, Danton. So our next reader is Dong Si. And Dong Si teaches Philippine Lit and Southeast Asian literature at the University of the Philippines at Diliman. His stories have appeared in the Trans-Pacific Literary Project, The Literary Apprentice, and Transit, an online journal. His book of fiction, A Natural History of Empire, won the Critica Cultura, Ateneo de Manila University Press First Book Prize. And here is Dong Si.
Hello. The story is titled "Then Cruel Quiet," and the passage I'm about to read doesn't really give you an indication of anything the story is about, but it's a fun passage. At least I think it's a fun passage. So here we go. Yeah. Samuel walked down along the newly painted street. Just a year ago, the mayor had decreed that the road was to be widened, after which the contractors descended. Now there were neither clouds in the sky nor trees by the road to block the heat. The sun swept through the emptiness unopposed. Perhaps, thought Samuel to himself, such things were not meant to last. He thought briefly of returning in triumph in his 40s to a landscape of glass and fiber optics. In the intersecting streets, things were as they had always been. Dirt, grass, a mango tree before a pastel-painted wall, a dozen gates of varied colors, all of them crowned with spikes, walls laced with broken glass. Passing Santo Domingo, he heard a babble of familiar voices. At the edge of the road, not far from the intersection, a group of Samuel's classmates had gathered around something on the ground. The boys, like Samuel, wore khaki pants and white polos with short sleeves. The girls wore white blouses with long blue pleated skirts. The former were crouching near the center of the circle, one of them with a stick to poke at whatever it was they had captured. Another took photos with his phone. The latter Samuel saw was Biddy. Around them were May, Gina, Ricky, Diego, and nearest to Samuel, leaning back from the group, her slender arms stretched into the air, Estrella. She saw Samuel in the distance and called him over. On the ground at the center of their circle lay a large frog, its hind legs crushed, its pelvis flattened into the dirt. A cacophony of colors spilled forth from its mouth. A car had rolled on the frog's lower half, dragging out its guts, intestines in the dirt, crumpled lungs and tender tissues, a pink tongue lolling in the sun. A column of black ants stretched out from the grass to these entrails, their legs pitter-pattering on the flesh. Diego, who held the stick, poked one of the bloated organs, spilling yellow ooze onto the road. Samuel felt his stomach lurch and a bit of acid hop up into his throat. He stepped back from the group and turned to face the asphalt. He counted to 10.
Thank you, Dong Si. Our next reader is Jack Wigley, who is an academic with a doctorate from UST. He is the chair of the Department of Literature and full professor at UST. He is a multi-awarded author of many books, including Kadenang Bahagari, Hantong Mga Kwento, Lait Pamor, Lait Chronicles, Home of the Ashfall, Falling into the Manhole, among many others. Here is Jack.
Hello, good evening. I'm going to read the story, The Fancy Dancer. If you have a copy of the book, it's on page 35. I was born and raised in Angeles City, a few meters away from the Clark Air Base. My father is an American GI and Air Force officer who was stationed in the Philippines during the Vietnam War. My mother is a Bicolana who had big dreams of making it big in the city and ended up working in a bar. I was their love child. Their story might have been the original source of the musical Miss Saigon, except that my story is set in the Philippines, not in Saigon. Just the same, I may have been Tam. I was in grade 4 when Mother rented the barbecue space along Fields Avenue in Balibaco. When my parents separated and the cocktail lounge that Mother used to own and run folded up, she had kept connected with the bar girls and the American servicemen who frequented the area. She didn't want to run another bar maybe because Mother felt she was already too old to become a mama-san to all these girls who wanted to marry American servicemen, their own idea of the great American dream. And she didn't want to run the risk of getting herself enmeshed in a controversy because we were all growing up and studying in a Catholic school. She didn't want us to embarrass ourselves in school. But she didn't want to lose all her contacts either. Somebody suggested that she open an eatery or cafeteria but she thought that it was a business that would be tiresome to put up. So much would be at stake. Maybe I could think of a business that does not require too much work and too many people, she said. This gave her the idea of opening a small space where she could run a barbecue business, something that she could personally handle and was easier to manage. She eventually opened the business during the summer vacation and obliged me to help her since I had no classes, together with 2 distant nieces she brought from Bicol during her last trip to Matno. My sister had a job at that time, and my brother was simply an operative. Every early afternoon, she would come from the market and I would help her marinate the chicken and pork meat. I would use bamboo sticks to skewer the necks of chickens, the gizzards, and the hot dogs together. She would also buy bundles of sampaguita garlands and rose corsages. Americans are very romantic. They want to give flowers to their girls, so I bought these too. It would be additional income for us, she said. Angeles City is now served by the Clark International Airport and the Clark Freeport Zone. But back then, when I was growing up, it was the home of the Clark Air Base, the largest United States military facility outside of continental America. I didn't know then that Fields Avenue, the street where I grew up, was a honky-tonk area for prostitution and a favorite spot frequented by U.S. servicemen. It was also known as an epicenter of sex trade. I didn't know that these girls who were good to me and mother were actually prostitutes. I just thought about them as my aunts, but I sensed that they were acting rather funny and strange because of the weird sexy dresses and thick makeup they wore and the erotic dancing and incessant cussing, the dating, the kissing of different men every night. Maybe they were a different kind of girls, I thought. At about 6 in the evening, we would go to the barbecue stall carrying 2 basins full of marinated meat, a styrofoam ice chest containing more meat without barbecue sticks, an improvised cash register, and some loose change. I would place a generous amount of charcoal on the grill and start building a fire. While fanning the charcoal, thick smoke would make my eyes water. Hurry up. Customers would soon be coming, Mother said, as she instructed the 2 girls to wipe the tables with a wet cloth. She started counting the change. I heard from Lydia that there are a lot of TDYs who arrived yesterday, so expect a lot of people coming in tonight. What's a TDY? I asked her. Temporary duty. These are American Air Force men who are only stationed at Clark briefly and temporarily because their work is somewhere else, maybe in Vietnam, Mother said nonchalantly. Oh, I muttered. I was meaning to ask her if my father had also been a TDY when he met her, but I guess Mother was not up to answering personal questions. So I continued preparing the grill. 3 hours later, the space was jam-packed with people. Mother had to call for 2 more helpers to assist us in serving the customers. My face felt like it was almost red because of heat coming from the grill. A sweat dripped from my forehead. But I was happy fanning the hot dogs and the chicken breasts. There was a lot of singing and dancing. Some Americans noisily stood up and raised their beers. The girls that they were with clapped their hands and started singing. One tall blonde guy walked to the jukebox and played One Way Ticket by Eruption. It was a cover of the Neil Sedaka classic and was a popular song at that time. Choo-choo train a-chucking down the track. Gotta travel on, ain't never coming back. Ooh, got a one-way ticket to the blues. 2 Americans got up and held the hands of their Filipino partners and started dancing on the street. There was no space inside and the music was loud enough to be heard outdoors. There were bystanders who stopped to watch the merrymaking. Others went out and also began dancing. If you want to know the rest of the story, you have to buy the book. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. And our last reader, not the least, definitely, is Yvette Fernandez, who has written over a dozen children's books, including Halo Halo Especial, the Dream Book Big Book series, and Good Morning Manila, and Good Night Manila, She is currently the chief storyteller at one of the nation's largest conglomerates. Previously, she had led the editorial team at Summit Media and was editor-in-chief at Esquire Philippines and Town and Country Philippines. For over 15 years, she was a reporter and editor of Bloomberg News in New York. She finished her master's degree in journalism at Columbia University. Yvette Fernandez.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for being here with us today. My story is called Zombie Queen. Lola could never say no to her youngest grandchild, the same way she never said no to her husband, for whom George had been named. Lola hesitated for a few seconds as she touched her newly plucked hair that had been teased, combed, and lacquered with a good amount of hairspray, and then shrugged as she stepped into the biggest of the pools in her floral house dress. Eloise watched as the pink flowers on her grandmother's dress turned blood red as the water seeped in. "Let's play zombies," George said. "You're the queen zombie, Lola. You're dead." "That doesn't sound like a fun game," said Lola. "I don't want to be dead." "But we're all dead, Lola," said Mika. "You'll be the queen of the dead." And so Lola became the zombie queen, sticking her arms out and shuffling after her beloved zombie grandchildren in a ruined hairstyle on that hot, sticky day. Afterward, everyone had ice candy made from coconut milk and sugar put in deep freeze. The cousins' teeth chattered as they bit into the ice candy, the cold shooting through their flushed skin, till they felt quite like the zombies they were emulating. Summer days were always fun at Lola's house when the cousins were sent over to visit every day while on school break. Mornings were spent playing pico in the driveway, kabulan in the garden, or shaking the mango tree and collecting salagubang that fell to the ground. They removed the insects' legs and tied them with string, so they buzzed around like the cheap plastic birds on a stick sold outside the church on Sundays. In the afternoons, when Lola said it was too hot to play outside, the cousins stayed indoors and played jackstones, Touch the Queen, and Mother May I in the long hallway upstairs while their yayas read comics or watched grainy old movies on a black and white TV set. One special summer a few years back, Blackie the dog had 4 babies, so each of the cousins got to choose a puppy. Kids and puppies romped about the whole summer, and all of them, 2-legged and 4-legged creatures, ended up with lice. A horrified Lola scrubbed them all down with pungent-smelling shampoo and watered-down gasoline, and the next day they were all frolicking together again. But Lola didn't like the idea that his grandchildren had puto. What if the neighbors found out? What would they think? And so he had Lola give the puppies away. Lola had no choice. She always followed what Lola told her to do, even if it broke her heart. The cousins cried for days till school started again, and they stopped going to Lola's house every day, till they eventually forgot about Blackie's offspring. Summer now seemed a lifetime ago as the cousins sat in the freezing chapel that reeked with the scent of stargazer lilies, as a never-ending stream of people filed past the bronze casket, holding a dead person the grown-ups claimed was Lola. It didn't look like Lola at all. That waxen figure with a sunken cheek and salmon-colored lipstick attempting to hide grayish lips. And that turban. They had never seen Lola in a turban before. It made her look like a genie, a scary one. 4 days earlier, Mang Pepe and Lola's helper Corazon had picked up Eloise and George in Lola's old Mercedes after school. "Where is Mama?" asked Eloise. "She said she had something to do and asked us to pick you up," said Mang Pepe. In the car, Mang Pepe told Corazon about an old lady who was very sick in the hospital. Her hair had been shaved off, he said, and she had a hole in her head. "It helps to have lots of money," Mang Pepe said, or she would already be dead. "Is the old lady a zombie?" George chimed in. Mang Pepe immediately stopped talking and started tut-tut-tutting to himself, and Corazon looked down at her calloused hands. "Who is this woman you're talking about?" Eloise demanded. "What happened to her?" She did not get a reply. That evening, a very tired, red-eyed mama sat Eloise down in her bedroom and told her that a blood vessel had exploded in Lola's brain earlier that day. She was in a deep sleep at the hospital. She was not in pain at all, Mama assured Eloise. "When will she wake up?" Eloise asked. Mama bit her lip and looked away. We're now going to proceed to the question and answer section. I prepared some questions in case nobody has any questions, but since there are a lot of, so there's some younger people here to be students, perhaps, would you like to ask any questions of this team group of writers here? Anyone from the audience, not necessarily students.
Don't ask me, please, I'm very sad now.
Okay, I'm going to start. Any one of the writers can answer the question. When you're writing a story, do you know how it's going to end from the time you're writing?
I like to acknowledge my teacher, Jeannie Dacros.
Yes.
Yeah, one of my teachers in the short story, along with Bush Police. Before I write a story, I know the ending, but it's not 100% clear. So the difficulty is how to go to that ending. But the ending is more or less clear. Like with my novel, I know the ending. I think I know the ending. Because the reviewers always tell me, your novel is so big and because it's a trilogy, no? And then they said, where's the sex in book number 2? So,
Maybe you can follow.
Similar, I have actually very often have a very clear ending in mind, but the story does not always agree with me. And if it wants to go somewhere else, I mean, I just kind of have to let it flow. Also, I think that this is the same pool around which many things are happening. There's a pig, there's a lola. It's a very exciting pool.
Okay, so when you write, do you start at the beginning and do it chronologically, or do you write differently when you write novels?
Oh, okay. I have only written like basically short stories so far, but when I write short stories, I do have an ending in mind usually. But despite the ending in my mind, I recreate characters when we write. Right? So sometimes the characters wants to take another route, so that's why the endings change. So when I write, I usually start from the beginning always, and then because I have to begin with the character. Having an idea of what does he or she look like, what's the character look like. So, if you guess, that's my answer to that question.
I think I do start from the beginning. For short, I do start, but I fool myself into thinking I'm writing in the middle of the story already. Because usually, that's a really cool question because I don't know, but I usually start thinking that I'm in the middle of the story, but it really is the beginning of the literal story. So I don't really, I don't really like, okay, this is the beginning, pero ganun. Very philosophical.
Do any of you do outlines of the book before you actually write?
I do.
Well, for CNF, it's quite different now for creative nonfiction because all you have to do is perhaps reminisce, jot down the major points, facets of your story or your life that you want to write about. For example, in this case, this is just a vignette, a snippet. So more or less, I already have an idea how to write about it. When I wrote the novel, it was different. But I had to outline. I'm a bit of an organizer. Medyo may mga index card pa yung mga characters ko, anong zodiac sign niya, Pisces ba yan, Scorpio, Libra, para kumpleto yung profile nila. And then, I tried, same with Sarge, I start from the beginning. Meron akong hubris na parang, okay, in medias res, in the middle of things, pero I usually start from the beginning. So it's like it's,
So do you follow your outline? Was it always?
no.
Yeah.
Hindi siya nasusunod. Kasi nga, like, writing is another animal, di ba? Yung parang it sometimes takes you to places that perhaps you have never processed before during the laying down of the story and the chapters.
The outline becomes a flowchart.
Yes, para siyang flowchart na, para siyang steps, process-oriented. You know?
Can I just add, because when I was as young as you are, many years ago, Linda T. Casper went to Ateneo. I was like 17 years old. Sabi niya, she would do drawings of the characters and visualize. We're talking about 1982, no? She would write them, she would draw them on paper, and then she would later write them. So that's one technique I got. And then from Marilu Diaz-Abaya, the late director, I used to work with her, she said that before she makes a movie, she would sometimes see them in her mind, no, in her dreams. So right now I'm writing my third novel. It's so hard to write, but I have an outline, very detailed outline, no? Very, very detailed. I finished 100 pages, and then I stopped, no, because I came here. I cannot write here. I love my trip, but I cannot write here, no?
How do you have a 100-page outline?
No, I finished 100 pages, but the outline is so detailed, no? May drawing pa ako ng mukha nila, where do you part the hair, and then everything. Yeah, that's a technique I learned from the late Roger Sikat, no? Saan daw yung hati ng buhok? Hindi dapat sa gitna. Remember, UP Workshop 1982. Hindi daw dapat sa gitna lagi ang buhok. Siguro yung hati dito, tapos yung... He was talking about a specificity in description. So, marami tayong... I'm happy that I studied in Ateneo UP, UST teachers. No, all these people taught me a lot.
Kayo naman mga bata, kung salita mo.
Well, I guess just to answer all of the questions in one go, actually, and kind of in line with what others were saying, I think there's like a constant, at least in my case, it's almost like a constant battle between my mind kind of desires and tries to enforce a certain structure, and then the story demands chaos. So the two of them are fighting. So there will be an outline. I'll have an ending in mind. I might start at what I think is the beginning, and then at some point all of that falls apart, and then I'll make another outline, and then that will fall apart, and then and then I get stuck at some point in the story, so I'll start writing in another section because I don't know how to get past the character who won't agree with me, all of that stuff. So it's a constant battle between that kind of desire for structure and chaos of the narrative, I guess.
Any question from the audience?
To add to what Dom was saying, sometimes I feel like the story is actually telling me what to do more than me controlling the story. So it's like, I guess if your character is very strong in your mind, then the character just ends up doing stuff and you feel like you're kind of a vessel of the story. But at the same time, I agree with Dom, especially like I'm trying to now write a novel. So ambitious, but it's so hard because in a short story you just have like that much to do and you're done. In a novel you have to like remember everything that you put at the beginning and at the it all has to make sense. So I think there's that constant struggle between having some sort of a structure that you can use to have coherence, and at the same time you have to let the creative process and discovery still happen while you're writing. Like, you know how they say people are plotters or pantsers? Like if you, I'm so not a plotter, so when I start writing, sometimes I'm like, I'll look at the outline I tried to, and then it's nothing like the outline, it just didn't happen. But like Dom said, it's like a constant struggle between you trying to enforce some sort of discipline into your story, but at the same time, like I heard of this one guy from Grub Street in the US, and he was writing a novel and they asked him for a synopsis. And he made the synopsis and he couldn't write the story anymore. It was like ruined for him. So
it is kasi to me, an outline is sort of an ambition eh. It's like a superstructure. So in fact, when I was young, up to now, na parang, I do not only imagine the outline, but also the table of contents. No, kasi parang you want to do a book, eh, diba? And then you outline your career. Parang wow! So now you gotta fulfill it, right? And that's the kind of pressure that I think I need. The outline for me is pressure. Kasi you need to fill that up. Diba? Otherwise, it's there, but there's nothing. So the outline really for me is like ambition and pressure, and at the end of the day, when you're writing it, you fulfill the outline. Might turn out to be something else. But then, the day you throw away that outline is talagang liberation day, diba? You've finished your story.
To me, the outline is a security blanket. Because otherwise there's a lot of chaos in the head, and it's struggling, the ideas, the little scenes, the little dialogue. It's trying to make a form, and I'm working and I'm trying to give it form. But it's also so chaotic that sometimes if I make a plan, it gives fine security to I feel kind of like safe that I'm going somewhere, but actually I'm following character, and somebody was talking about character. So then the up just goes out the door, and somebody was talking about constantly changing the outline, and I will also do that. And I know that I'll do the outline, and it's really not gonna be it, but I just feel a little bit better about having a plan. So.
Any questions from the audience?
It's actually
Oh, there's one question.
What inspired you to write for a novel? Who and what inspired you to write a story? This story? All of us.
This particular story. Or
How old were you when you thought that you could write?
how old were you when you first wrote it?
That's an interesting question. I envisioned myself to be a writer when I was in elementary school. I really wanted to write. Grade school pa lang ako. And then I continued reading novels in high school. Then I took up maybe literature in college and took up creative writing. So I think that's an ongoing process for me.
Okay. I think it's not a profound answer. I like telling stories. I like making up stories, and I'm too much of a loner to work with other people. So I thought, okay. So which job can you do that? Tell stories without working with other people. Can't be a filmmaker. You need too many people for that. Can't be a comic artist because I can't draw. Writing. You just need one brain who can use language. So we'll go with that. So that's kind of like that.
I think when I took up the writing class with Linda Casper when I was 16 or 17, I was with Benino de Santos of Ateneo and Reyes Unico and Fatima Lim and Rofel Pion and Albert Alejo. It was a good group. And Linda Casper was carrying her manuscript. She was writing her novel. She was telling us the process. Nakangangalang ako ng ganyan because her novel was 500 pages and still growing. I said, oh my God, how can you write 500 pages samantalang sa Ateneo? 10 pages na research paper. Hirap na kami, no? So she was like a superwoman. I was like 16 years old. And then I took the creative writing class of the late Manuel Torres. Oh, he was so frightening. I wasn't afraid of him, you know. Para siyang bubuga ng apoy, no, when he would criticize our works, no. Yeah, he would say, okay, let's discuss your effusions for this week, no. We call it writing, but effusions, no. So, but he was very frightening, yes, but he taught us, you know, to listen to words and to weigh the value of words and to listen to the silences between the words. I think that's what I learned from the late Emmanuel Torres.
I must have been 8 or 9, and someone told me that the writer of the Hardy Boys, Franklin W. Dixon, was not a person, but was in fact many, many people. And that was my revelation that, holy shit, anyone can do this. So that kind of started me down the path, although it was a long, 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 long journey. I just want to mention, interestingly, the story in this book, Lola King and the Christopher Recognizers, wonderfully, thank you, Cecilia, for publishing it now, but was first published by Sarge. And that was my first professional publication. So it's a full circle thing. I started, when I was 9, my father died. And so what I did was I wrote letters to him to update him of my life. And so that was the beginning of the writing. And then at some point in time, my sister gave me one of those Lock and Key diary. So I would write really bad books in there and parang OA talaga. But I liked the idea. You're right. Parang it was so personal, and so I fell in love with the idea of writing during that time frame. But the first time was updating my dead father, about what was going on with me.
With me, in my case, it rather came belatedly. No, I first published my book when I was already 43 years old. I never saw myself as a writer when I was growing up. I thought I was more of an actor, yung gano'n, mahilig akong magturo sa mga bata, mas bata sa akin, tapos yung mga hindi nakikinig, pinapalo ko sila. So, I would read stories from the book that my mother gave me during Christmas. No, I'm not like that anymore. Yes, but I was writing here and there, but I never took it seriously. But Jean Hidalgo was my advisor in my PhD literature degree. It was creative writing, my first book. She was my advisor, and I would always tell people over and over that she was the door that opened, paved the way for me to come in and really cultivate the world of writing. So, ngayon, umaarte pa rin ako, gusto ko pa rin maging actor, pero nagsusulat na rin ako on the side.
We took this whole COVID train to just kidding. It's so strange for me to think of an answer, because I can't tell when I wanted to be a writer. Parang, maybe because when I grew up, I was really surrounded by writers and books. My dad was a writer, but I think I started writing before he became a writer. So parang we were just really surrounded by books, and so on the other hand, it wasn't about being a writer, but writing. Writing wasn't a profession for me. It was always something that it was a thing. It was a thing that I read. I read a lot. All I did was read. In fact, until I was in my late teens, I was always at library zero. I did not own a book I hadn't read. No? So, the answer is I don't know. I was just surrounded by it. It was natural to write, to try to write.
Okay. The first thing I ever wrote, I think I was in 6th grade. It was Typhoon Signal number 2, and there was no class, and there was a brownout. And I found my dad's, my parents' typewriter at home, and I just started writing something. I actually found this, I think I wrote 4 chapters of Hawaii book, but I never finished it. I actually found the manuscript, or whatever you call it, the typewritten pieces of paper maybe about a month ago, looking through some boxes, so maybe you'll finish it in the future. But I think that's how I started. But unlike many of the people at this table, I don't really write fiction, because my training as a journalist, I write non-fiction, stuff based on real life. So this story actually, when I did take a fiction class, we took a class with Noel De Jesus, which is how we produced this. I was having such a hard time, so I ended up just writing a story that happened to me and I just changed the names. So basically, it's not fiction. Anyway.
I think I can claim to be the oldest person. I mean, I was the oldest one. I was like 60. It was during COVID. And I was like, I always read a lot like Sarge. I just read. Library zero minus, I don't know, rereading the books how many times. And then I was like, so boring and, you know, maybe I could actually write. I never thought I had the introspection or whatever to write. But, so I harassed Brady Sumiko, who I only met like once. And sabi ko, I was like, can you be my writing teacher? And then I went to Jing's class and then Noel, and I just keep on trying, you know, to find. There's so many free, by the way, for people who are interested in writing, you should go to Substack, the app, substack.com. There's so much good, and it's free. So easy.
It's time for the signing. Okay. So I'd like to thank everybody. Oh, sorry. Not yet pala. There's a part pala.
I don't really know what else I'm going to say that Yvette would have said, but yeah, I guess we're just going to wind up now. Thank you so much for listening and being with us and buying our book. We're very grateful. Please stay and have them signed. Thank you so much. Oh, sorry. We've already thanked everyone. I think Cecilia, is there anyone else we need to thank again? We're good. Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone.
There's another one.
I started writing and I'm just starting.